I'm Traci Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap.
Hi, I'm Chad Franzen from Rise 25. Today, I am the host of the People Strategy Podcast, where we dive into the latest trends and best practices in talent management and organizational development. This episode is brought to you by Elevated Talent Consulting, a leading provider of comprehensive talent management solutions. Elevated Talent Consulting was founded on a belief that every individual has a right and choice to be fulfilled in their work. As leaders, we have an obligation to create space for ourselves and team members to thrive. Creating that space often fails, even with the best intentions, resulting in employee disengagement and missing business outcomes. As you'll hear from Traci in this episode, she uses her coaching, consulting, and training expertise to serve organizations through the Team Retention Program. Discover how Elevated Talent Consulting can transform your workforce at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. Traci Austin is a certified coach and HR professional with over 2 decades of experience bridging the gap between the C-suite and HR leaders in aligning the business strategy to the business results. She is focused on partnering with leaders at all levels to create fulfilling work. This is done by focusing on 4 levers of engagement: fit to role, leadership, team, and cultural alignment to the strategies and core values to meet the business outcomes. She is the chief strategy consultant and owner of Elevated Talent Consulting, a certified women-owned business that partners with leaders in the mid-level manager roles and HR professionals to bridge the gap with both their team and the executive team in exceeding performance expectations while being fulfilled in their work. Traci, it's great to talk to you again. How are you?
It's great. Thanks so much for being on again, Chad.
Yeah, hey, my pleasure. So today we are going to be talking about goal setting with intention. Is there anything that you'd like to mention before we get started here?
Yeah, absolutely. As we've chatted with so many folks over the years, one of the key things with goal setting is what is actually, the reason why we're doing this. And I had a great conversation with Tina Marie Wolford a couple of months ago, very specifically on HR's role inside of an organization. And Tina Marie is a consultant that, goes into organizations and kind of says to HR, you've kind of screwed this up really badly. And here's how we are going to realign. And that goal of the alignment for the best interest of the people and the organization. And so, I love sharing that story and kind of referring back to that specific podcast because it really talks about the importance of setting the goal up front so we actually know at the end, did we achieve it or not?
Yeah, that's important. So, you mentioned goals. As we get started here, just give me a definition of what a goal is. I know I scored one once in soccer.
I know, right? We have all different kinds of goals. And, you've got, if we think about sports, it is getting the whatever it is through typically a net. And yet when we start to talk about goals personally or in business, it's not quite as black and white as that. And one of the things that we love to do with our clients is set definitions so that we have common language to align back on, that we all agree on what it is that we're doing. So of course I go to dictionary.com or you Google it. Sometimes Google lies to you, but so dictionary.com says the object of a person's ambition or effort, an aim or desired result. So the example they give is going to law school has become the most important goal in his life. It's interesting to look at it that way. I look at that goal and kind of say, okay, there's all these other things tied in there, and the aim or desired result. The issue that we so often see with goals is one, we don't set them and we don't really know how to set them well to actually look at the end and say, did we actually achieve that? And so, when we're chatting with our clients and participants in our programs, we really look at a goal as a form of communication for both ourselves and those that, have influence within that goal. So, Chad, you and I have a joint goal together, which is to create this series for the podcast that highlights each module in our team retention program. And so we had a lot of conversation around that goal and what it would look like.
So what do you think it's important? What do you think, setting these types of goals is important, especially in the workplace?
Yeah. So there's a couple reasons why I think goals are really important. Is there's, when we set a goal, there's the result of the goal. So the result of the goal might be the output. Hey, Chad, you and I recorded a podcast and we posted it. Great. Now, what is the outcome of that goal? So the outcome may be that we are able to inspire at least one individual that reaches back out and tells us in a comment and with a 5-star review the impact of our podcast, right? The outcome of the goal may be that we have folks join our team retention program, right? So it's really laying out what that is, of what the goal is and what the outcomes we want from that goal. And of course, I love looking at data. So, a quick Google search tells us lots of different things. But one of the things that I found within a search is, and this came from, a number of these came from Psychology Today and some of the other items, but people who set goals are 43% more likely to achieve them. 48% of goal setters say that they always write their goals down. 33% of Americans will most likely set goals. 38% are somewhat likely. Um, you know, so when we start to look at those goals, what is the outcome of that? So of the 20% of people who set goals, 70% do not achieve them. So like when we start talking about not just goal setting, but effective goal setting, what does that look like? And how are we communicating that goal to bring our team around us? And I know that's what we're going to chat about today.
Sounds good. Yeah, 70% did not achieve them. Maybe maybe if they're personal goals, they just wrote them down and then they forgot about them after 3 months or something.
Right. So it's like, hey, our goals in front of us. And when we share our goals with other people, guess what we introduce into the mix?
A little accountability.
Absolutely. So now we've got, you sending me emails saying, hey, Traci, when are we going to do this podcast? Hey, Traci, did you send me XYZ yet so that I can write my questions? And I'm going, now we've got an accountability framework to actually make the goal happen.
So we've talked about engagement in the past. It's kind of maybe self-explanatory, but from your experience, what impact do goals have on engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know about you, but I like to win. So it's like I like to win and I want the folks around me to know that I'm winning. And if I feel in a work environment like no matter what I do, I can't win, I'm going to start to, kind of pull back. Like, why am I doing this? Like, why does my effort doesn't matter? It's never good enough. All of those things, right? So from a coaching perspective, like when I'm coaching mid-level managers, we're really talking about what does that winning look like so that we know that we're moving forward. So goal setting allows us to say, here's where the win is, and here's the steps we're going to do in order to get that win. And when we have both the accountability around it and know what that win is, we're much more likely to get excited about doing it.
So goal setting is part of the team retention program that we've talked about. Why do you guys focus on goal setting with mid-level managers?
Simply, people don't know how to set goals. Very simply, so I think we've all heard SMART goals, and one of the, statistics that, Google's tell us is that 98% of company leaders say that their company has a goal framework. So it's fantastic to have a goal framework. The key here is, do we know actually how to utilize the goal framework? And are we keeping those goals in front of us that they're actually tied to performance? They're tied to some sort of a bonus or monetization that we know what that is, or they're tied to something that is important to that individual. I, don't know about you, Chad, but I know when my kids were little and, we'd set a goal, it might be, hey, let's run to the fence and run back. And whoever gets back first gets a high five, right? Mm-hmm. There's the goal and the reward for that goal. So often we're not tying what that is. And we all, want to typically be appreciated, acknowledged, and have something, especially if we're putting a lot into what that is. And sometimes those are intrinsic rewards as well.
So is a reward a big part of it, though?
It really depends upon what it is and what that alignment is. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we talk about the goal framework we use, which is a SMART goal framework. And I think probably most of our listeners have heard of the SMART framework, which is specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-based, and that why is why. Why are we doing this? Why is this goal important? Because if it's not important and going to move the needle forward on something, why are we doing it? Because I don't know about you, but there's a lot of things in my life where I'm like, why am I doing this? If I stop doing it, will it actually matter? If that answer is no, then I'm going to stop doing it.
So the acronym is SMART, the same ones you used, and then with the why, which is the word why.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Would you say the why is the most important part of the SMART goal framework?
Why is incredibly important. And I want to give a shout out to another previous podcast guest. Byron Lowe chatted about, what is your big why? What is that thing that is so important to you? And when we know what our purpose is, we're able then to start to craft and create work that is fulfilling for us, right? And you talked about this in your intro, it's like, how do we create work that is fulfilling for the individuals in the role? We talked about the employee value proposition a couple of weeks ago, where we need to tie an individual's personal values into the organizational culture and the organizational values. Therefore, within the goals, if we can tie in why that goal is important, now we're able to make it meaningful. So, so often I will be given, goals and I'm like, this doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm either going to just go through the motions of getting it done, or I will figure out, okay, if I know I have to do it, it might just be a do goal, meaning get the thing done and off my plate so I can go do something else. Mm-hmm. Or it may be a goal where I'm like going, okay, this will have a very important impact and I can tie it specifically into why we're doing it. Let me give you another example. Christy Metcalf was one of our very first, podcast guests. And Christy tells a story of, how she is walking through Boeing with one of the executives, and it was a brand new executive. And as she's going through this Boeing plant, this executive asks an individual on the line very specifically what she's doing. And she goes, I don't know. I'm just putting these two, connectors together, that these electronic pieces together. I don't know what they do, and her attitude was just kind of like, we're going through the motions. That executive came back the next day and said, hey, I want you to know exactly what you're doing and the impact of it. Here's pictures of the lives that connector piece that you're putting together saved, because that is actually the emergency lighting on the plane. Here's the planes where the emergency lighting was impacted, and here's the people that actually saved. Now there's a why to the goal. So often, especially in manufacturing, which is a lot of our clients, it's, how many XYZ things are we getting done in a certain period of time? So we have the productivity of it, but why are we doing it? If we can understand the why and tie that into something intrinsic, we're going to be more engaged in the work because we know it has an impact.
So speaking of personal goals, what role does personal goal alignment play in professional success?
Yeah. So, that personal goal alignment is very significant in that professional success, because we want to tie those two things together. And it may be things that aren't necessarily 100% directly connected. So one of the questions that I love to ask folks in an interview, and I think you've heard me say this before, and we're asking, the guests on our show this, which is what's a professional bucket list? What's a work bucket list item that you have? And then what is a personal bucket list item that you have? I stole that from Jonathan Reynolds with Titus Talent, because brilliant. But when we think about that, what we're doing is we're tying together personal goal, professional goal, can we tie that into what their job is? Because now that individual sees that we're paying attention to what's important to them. I'll give you an example of, how this came out with a client. So I have several clients that are association management organizations. So they run associations very specifically for a field. So it might be construction, it might be converters, it might be manufacturing, it might be whatever. There's thousands of associations out there. And so they have all of these event planners. And one of the executive assistants had stated, for me, I want to travel to San Diego and I want to have experience building out, marketing infrastructure and really seeing by utilizing my writing skills, the impact that has on folks' experience at a conference. That's not built into her job description at all. So guess what the executive director and I did? We laid out and said, we're doing a conference in San Diego in November. Why don't we have her come and give her this piece of it? Then she's hitting a personal and a professional goal together. And what that does is it engages her, but it also allows us to retain folks because they know that we're personally invested in them. And it has an impact then on the business results.
So you've clearly laid out the reasons why goal setting is important. Are there maybe some pitfalls to that, and how do you help participants avoid that?
Absolutely. So here's the pitfalls that we see. And it's not the pitfall in goal setting necessarily, it's the pitfall in the how that we do it. And so a key piece of this is the clarity, right? So are we actually writing our goals so that it's incredibly clear that we know that when a goal is achieved, right? So there's two ways that we really solve for this. One is, in our team retention program, we do this, but I also do this workshop as a standalone workshop, both with executive leaders and with teams. And so I have our, participants write out a goal. What is a specific goal that you have? And so I'll give you, I'll just make up a goal of mine real quick, right? So I may have a goal that says that I want to speak at 15 conferences in 2024. Okay. So great, 15 conferences in 2024. What are all of the problems with that goal, Chad?
The conferences could be irrelevant. Timing may not work out. I don't know, what are some other ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So 15 conferences. Do I want those to be virtual? Do I want to travel for those? Do I want to be paid for those? So there's all the different nuances in that. So if I were to rewrite that and say specific, okay, so I want to speak at 15 conferences in 2024 that are specifically aligned to leadership in the construction and manufacturing field. And I will be paid X dollar amount for each conference. And 5 of those I will travel to. The remainder will be virtual. So that's specific. It's measurable. Can I measure that I was booked and actually presented these conferences? Yes. Can I measure the dollar amount that I want to receive as an outcome? Yes. Is it actionable? Can I write a task list of what I'm going to do and either do that or delegate it to a member on my team in order to make that happen? Absolutely. Is it realistic? We're in August of 2024. Is that realistic? Depending upon what I've done so far this year, the answer may or may not be, right? So when we're setting goals, we also want to make sure that we've built the infrastructure underneath it, that the goal is actually realistic. So we may look at that and say, oh, realistic in this time frame. Yes. However, realistic based on everything else that I've committed to? No. So that realistic piece becomes really important based on the lens that we're looking at it through. Time-based, we checked that one. We said 2024. And why? Why is speaking at conferences impactful and important to me? One, I want to make an impact for people. Remember fulfilling work, right?
Mhm.
Why else? So, we have revenue goals and impact goals inside of our organization. And we also have goals for creating and providing work to our consultant teams. So it hits all of those items as to the why. And again, it goes back to that why of fulfilling work, which is tied into elevated talents mission along with personally for me.
So the why really helps keep the goals meaningful rather than just having goals for the sake of goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, when we very specifically look at that too, a key piece here is purpose. What is the purpose specifically for for what we are doing? And, within that, there is a um another previous podcast on here that tells this story phenomenally well. And that is with Rob Grady. And Rob really talks about how they make their decisions inside of their organization through what their core values are along with a purpose, right? So it ties back to that. And so, that if you're looking for a really good story of, and inspiration, check out the episode with Rob Grady on that.
So once you've achieved a goal, you have a meaningful goal and you've kind of put your mind to it and you've achieved the goal. How important is it to recognize that achievement or even to celebrate that achievement?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a couple things here. There is recognizing things in a way that an individual wants to. I just had a chat with Dr. White, who wrote the 5 languages of appreciation at work, and this distinction between recognition and appreciation, right? So who's the recognition really for? And so, if we shift that into appreciation, how do we appreciate someone the way they want to be appreciated? That then drives engagement, right? So when we look at that appreciation, we definitely want to celebrate the individual in the way they want to be celebrated. We have lots of folks in the organizations that we work with and on our own team that will never want to shout out on LinkedIn ever. They don't want that public recognition. Right. Well, if that's the only way that I'm appreciating them, I'm actually disengaging them versus engaging them. And so understanding and really asking the question up front, hey, how do you want to celebrate this when we achieve it? Now we're in a two-way conversation versus what is important for me as the leader in the way I may want to be appreciated or celebrated.
So if a person says I don't want to be celebrated, is that is that something that should be argued?
Well, I'd go deeper than that, right? So now we're going to throw on the coaching hat and say, okay, so how do you like to be appreciated? I love to have them take the 5 languages, the MBI inventory from the languages, right? So we can see how they want to be appreciated. And it may be that they don't like that public recognition, but writing a handwritten note and putting it on their desk with, their favorite snack. Okay, they notice. I'm acknowledged. They, my leader said something to me about it, so I know that they appreciate what I'm doing, right? And guess what? We are the expert on ourselves. No one else is the expert on us, right? So, Chad, you couldn't tell me how I feel or what I want. Only I can do that. And so that's really where we come back to, are we having those conversations with our team members about what's important to them and that appreciation? And by the way, you could create a goal around this for your leadership team about, hey, what does engagement look like? And do we have a goal specifically aligned to how we're engaging our team and how we're measuring that?
So you have experience working with organizations from different kinds of industries. How does that kind of impact your approach to goal setting?
We're all humans. Right? And so when we look at it, sometimes I think we really complicate things with different industries and big and small and all of those. And all of those things are true in many instances. Yet One of the things is, we're all humans. So we all have things that are important to us. We have our personal goals and our professional goals. And if work is the barrier to us living our life versus, work being a part of life and a means to do some additional items, those are two completely different outcomes. And so depending upon what that is, will definitely have an impact on what those goals are. So, going back to industry and going back to size of organization, does the way that we do our goal setting change? Of course, you've got your OKRs and you have all of these things built in. You'll hire a McKinsey consultant or you'll hire consultants to come in and very specifically help you create the infrastructure and put it in systems like Lattice and whatnot to track it. That'll definitely change between the size of an organization for sure. But at the end of the day, we are in relationship with those on our team. And when we as leaders, so for the managers in our programs, our team retention program, our leadership program, it's really about how are we personally connecting with the folks on our team to create those goals that are meaningful.
Do you have an example of goal setting in action?
Yeah, for sure. And before we kind of go to the goal setting and action that I want to line out that is incredibly important is how are our goals tied together, right? So we talked about personal and professional and how that's tied to a person. I call that the I factor when I'm, doing our workshops. Yet very specifically, goal setting is a key piece of performance management. Did we hit our goals? Every organization has goals. Every board has goals specifically for the organization. So one of the key items is, have we cascaded our goals in a way that the personal goals for an individual are tied into the outcomes that we're looking for the team and the outcomes that we're looking for the division and the outcomes that we're looking for the organization. So a key piece of goal setting is cascading those goals to ensure that what an individual or person is working on is actually the right thing for the vision of the organization and those business goals. And so often what we see is that there's a disconnect between what a person's working on or what a team's working on and the actual business results that the C-suite has laid out. And that's a huge issue. So, with that, I just want to stress that cascading of goals piece. So, as we look at, a specific story, again, I want to send you back to Rob Grady's, podcast where he really talks about, how they've set goals and what that looks like and how they make those business decisions through those core values. With the clients that we're working with, one of our clients right now is experiencing tremendous, tremendous growth. Like we're talking 300% growth year over year. And within that, what we're starting to do and have been doing is there's an organizational goal, which is a profitability and a revenue goal. And notice the importance of that. You can have a revenue goal, but not be profitable. And so having the two becomes really important. So for the team, each team has a goal. So, production team, has a goal of how much product they're going to produce. The warehouse team has a goal for, how we get the items out and that they're accurate, et cetera. So, there's so many pieces within that. We want to make sure that then it ties back to the profitability and or the revenue growth. So revenue is going to be on the sales side. Profitability is going to hit every other department. And so tying that together in a way that the team can truly understand it and then breaking down those different teams. Once we get to that individual level, I love these to be super simple, right? So very simple. So it can be, hey, we just want 100% accuracy on a form that we're going to use called 4 eyes, meaning, hey, we're going to have one person look at this item, make sure it's accurate, and then another person is going to put another set of eyes on it and sign off on it. Well, if we're not paying attention to that, what happens is we blind sign, right? So we may focus on that for 1 month until that process becomes habit that's important, that starts to impact the larger goal of the quality of the things that are specifically going out. So that's an example of how all of those things kind of work together. And what it does is it gives the individuals the opportunity to start to name what's important and impactful to them and start to build the trust in the relationship between their supervisor and the employees themselves.
So if an employee, let's say an employee and his or her manager has, they've discussed certain goals and the employee has achieved every goal,
Mhm.
then what?
Yeah. So this is, the employees achieved every goal. This is where I start to have the conversations, or the leader starts to have the conversations with the employee of really what are their goals? Because we have goals within the job, but where do they see themselves either within the organization? Where's their career growth? This is where I love, those two questions I talked about earlier, which is what is a work bucket list item and what's a personal bucket list item? If we can align those two things together, now we can really get at, all right, what's important to them? This is where sometimes we will start to cross between teams and say, all right, are you starting to get bored in your role? Because what we know is that, it's typically 3 years. That's what we have right now, is 3 years of how long we stay within a role. Well, if we can start to talk about the growth, now we can, create a new 3-year span to retain somebody, almost every single time we're doing that. So those are some key pieces to that. And I would say if an employee says, hey, I've reached every single goal, my guess is we're not setting big enough goals and we're not dreaming big enough. And I would just challenge our leaders to dare to dream for themselves of what is possible, but also challenge our folks to dare to dream. If they have, they want to travel or they want to buy a house, that's one that's been coming up a ton lately, as employees saying, hey, I want to buy a house. I say, great. What does that look like? How do we make that happen? Well, I need to do XYZ to do that. And a lot of times it's, I need to make more money. Okay. But it may be, um, understanding and learning personal finance. It may be some other items. And this is where we can be collaborative partners
Hmm.
with our team that, values them as a person, and supports them to hit both those organizational goals and personal goals. So maybe, hey, I'm going to cross reference and, be a part of another team for this specific project. And that gives them that growth opportunity.
Okay. Hey, very interesting, informative, and certainly useful. I wish I had maybe 10 years ago employers who had these types of priorities. But it was great to talk to you about this, Traci. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. And guess what? I want to hear what your goals are. So for our listeners, go ahead and leave us a review. Our goal is to have, several of those 5-star reviews and hear what those key items are. If you're curious about our team retention program, we'd love to chat as well. So you can find that in the show notes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Traci.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.